Thank you, everybody, for joining us. We're going to go in a slightly different order than we normally do because we're lucky to be joined by Terry Kirshner, the director of the Westchester Library System. Many of you who attend the meetings regularly will know one of the topics that Dr. LaRuth Gray has talked to us about is the E-rate for libraries, purchasing sort of internet bandwidth. And Terry's going to tell us a little bit tonight about sort of what is going to be for us for consideration, expanding on what Dr. Gray's talked about before, and sort of what type of, if we do move in a direction of the E-rate, what that means in terms of, filters that would be sort of placed on the, the internet usage of the library. So thank you so much for taking the time to join us.
No, well, thank you. So just as a reminder, the notion of E-rate is that it is a reimbursement process. So it's really not income per se, but it will be any reimbursements that we could receive for computer-related types of purchases. One of the considerations is, though, that you do need to have certain filters in place in order to be eligible for this. So at the moment, it's basically revolves around the Children's Internet Protection Act, or CIPA. And what that basically says is that we would need to make sure that we were limiting access to inappropriate materials, which is always sort of a vague term. What exactly does that mean? But the great thing is that over the past few years, I would say the past 3 years, we've actually seen a real growth and development in filtering software. When WLS looked at this issue about 4 years ago, we were very concerned that if we were to filter, it would actually limit the access to certain types of material, or it would easily let certain types of material in. So it just seemed very, not really in the whole freedom of information role. The government itself and this filtering software have really sort of defined what it is that we need to limit, and there is actually a very small threshold for what would need to be filtered out. And it's basically illegal content. And at this point, illegal content is basically child pornography. So it's illegal to begin with. It's not something that we would want in the libraries. So we feel very comfortable that we found a product, which is called ODNet, that would allow us to just limit it to...
Could you spell the one thing you just mentioned?
Yeah, I will. I have it here right in front of me. It's OpenDNS. So open, and then capital D, capital N, capital S. And what it would allow us to do is pick one category, which is called the Internet Watch Foundation, and they specifically target children's pornography as the area that we would not provide any access to.
When you say specifically, you mean solely?
Solely. That's the goal. If we were that provider. If we were to find that perhaps other sites had gotten blocked erroneously, there's a very easy vetting process that we could work with the company to say, we believe that this one was inadvertently blocked, please check. If something came through that wasn't supposed to go there, you can do the reverse and just say, whoa, this was supposed to be blocked. What the board is planning to do is build in a 1-year evaluation process. So we would move forward. We would have to update the WLS Internet policy just to be a little bit clearer about the filtering aspect. Our thought would be that we would introduce that update at our March meeting and then have it be voted on either in the April or May meeting. And at that point, we would be able to just go forward, probably purchase the software in June, get it up and running over the summer, and then try it out and just really see how it works. It'd be about a $50,000 investment, but we would be eligible for roughly $120,000 in E-rate. So, it's, you spend a little bit, you get a little bit more. We feel that it might be worth trying.
Is that a one-time investment?
I would say the 50,000 is going to be the high for the first year. Our thought with that, it would
So
drop
there's an
down.
annual
Exactly, there'll be
licensing.
an annual licensing.
So we're talking net starting at,
At around 75 for the first year and probably closer to 100 after that.
Could you talk about, a little bit about when we did not support the E-rate and we gave up the money, and what's happened since then, just so that, and how, because 120,000 may not,
Well,
in some board members' minds, may not be worth it.
Yeah.
In terms of freedom of privacy.
yeah. I think the impact that you've seen as member libraries has been around the ability to provide expanded broadband, because there is cost associated with that. We've been a little bit slower at getting the speeds at the higher rate. I think in other ways that you've seen some impact have been just in overall replacement of network devices. Instead of doing it every 3 years, we might be doing it every 4 years. I don't think it actually breaks anything, but I think it's just a matter of, how nimble and quickly do we respond perhaps to, the changing needs of the libraries. Not to say that E-rate would ever be the only way that that can be done. Obviously, if it's something that we have to focus on, we will try to find the money somewhere else. But once again, E-rate is something that helps relieve some of the pressure. It's not necessarily the solution. So I don't think anyone should feel that they have to, go this route. It's just a route that we believe makes fiscal sense at this point in time.
And what has changed since the board voted not to support E-rate, the WLS? I think they need to know.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is just the nature of the filtering software itself. I think, that it's much more finesse than it was before. I think the board itself has changed. Just a constituent who was, very adamant against it is different. So I'm not sure if there's other aspects.
That's
Yeah.
Do you have the software provider, when you said the turnaround time is pretty quick in terms of, if a site, somebody tries to visit a site and they come to Tom and they say, this site is such and such and it's blocked, we want to see if we can get access to it, like, is it what's their expected sort of turnaround time and that kind of stuff?
Well, it's two parts. So one is from a user perspective, there's actually the ability to do a verification that you are over 18 years of age, that you understand that the site was blocked and you still want to proceed. So there's certainly that ability.
So it can be
immediately.
literally overridden by the user?
It could be, yes.
Oh, that's interesting. That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, well, I think you should hear all of this.
Yeah.
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 And that would obviously get monitored, so we'd have to kind of figure out, what is that site? So we would get a report at the system level.
Got it.
And then we can review that just to make sure that it wasn't perhaps something that we needed to be more aware of. And then.
Are you like compelled to, this is where you're
Yep.
going with this, if somebody overrides it and you get a report and it's like a child pornography site, are you then obligated to report it to the authorities?
We would report that we saw an incident, but we wouldn't know.
I guess you wouldn't know who it was.
We wouldn't know
would
who
you?
it was.
Okay.
So it would
You would
not
just, you would probably know it was
automatically-
at the New Rochelle Public, you probably could be able to see the machine.
Probably not even the machine. We would
but-
know
but-
that it was at this library location.
You wouldn't be able to track the IP address to the actual unit?
Generally, the way that we have is we have one IP address that will bounce around, so.
So it would not automatically block pornography sites, child pornography sites. It would not automatically do that.
Well, in theory, the software will. This is sort of the exception if there was something that was
So
perhaps new and not
overriding
captured.
would be those websites that the system detects 18 and older, but not pornography related.
Yes, so I guess I'm not quite sure if I understand your question, but let's do a sort of a hypothetical. Maybe that would help. Let's say that there was a website that was.
Let's say it was like, for lack of a better term, like MTV.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
I'm going to go to the MTV website and it pops up, are you of 18 years old and older? And I say yes.
Mm-hmm.
Would that allow me, knowing that there's music videos and this and that, like, would it, you know what I'm saying?
You would have access
But it
then-
shouldn't, theoretically, for a site like MTV, it shouldn't block it. in the
Correct,
first place.
exactly.
It should only block
Child pornography.
Period.
Yeah.
You should only be getting that acknowledgement
Yeah.
if it's theoretically.
Exactly. So I was thinking, I'm not even sure if this group exists, but let's say that there was a site against child pornography, but for some reason it erroneously got linked into that category. That would be the kind of site where the override would occur, and then we would investigate at the WLS level when we got a report to say, maybe this should be not blocked, and then we would send that recommendation forward to the organization.
So
to
there's no
review.
scenario where somebody has to wait to access something
No.
if they can click through.
Correct.
Terry, I'm wondering, obviously you made a selection in regards to the software that you think is best suited to the Westchester library system and its libraries. Is there a track record? Are there other libraries or other networks that have used it, and what has their experience been?
There is, and obviously, I'm not going to be the person that knows the full track record, but based on the research that the IT staff did, this came across as the one that was most consistently not going to block things erroneously or to, allow things to get through that shouldn't. Many of the other larger systems are using this, so we know, that we wouldn't be the largest, we wouldn't be the first. This is well established.
Good. Thank you.
And if this board did not want to support WLS's recommendation, what does that mean?
I would say that that really means that there would be a further discussion at the WLS level.
So is it like a how does this work? Is it a unanimous sort of thing, or is it?
It would be a board decision, so it's not that all 38 libraries would have to agree, but more that if a library were really concerned through
You
their
would take that into
representative.
consideration.
Yeah, and, there's always a public comment period at WLS as well.
Sure.
So.
How big is the board?
15.
And at the last board meeting, I was asked, how does this board, and you said it in a way different from the last board. The last board actually voted not to accept the E-rate money. And I told you half of you said do it and half of you said don't. And so there's a leaning more toward acceptance by most of the board members.
Out of the 15 members, how many last time voted
Almost
against,
all.
and how many this
Terry
time
knows
supported?
Ooh,
The 38 libraries were represented.
yeah, I want to say the first time, I believe it was almost unanimous.
Unanimous.
Yeah,
Against.
against.
Against accepting the
And
money.
when was that? Do you recall when we?
I believe it was
were-
2013 or 2014, so, yeah.
And what was the biggest, the overall concern point, I think we all understand, but in terms of the change in the fact pattern, is it really the biggest development, the advancement of the software, the filtering software, that's really the
Yeah,
biggest?
it's really gotten much more fine-tuned, yeah. And it's easier that it doesn't require as much library staff interaction,
Because people can.
because
go
people
on
have
their own.
more control to move forward. And it respects your internet policy at the local level a little bit more too, because you've sort of determined, what is acceptable
We
policies
still
here.
we have an ability to be more restrictive, frankly, if we see content
We-
deem
and
objectionable
we
under our
a-
policy.
And we do take action when patrons are looking at websites that are inappropriate, objectionable. We will ask them to cease and desist, and if they don't, we'll end their session then and there. Terry, I just wanted to follow up in regards to the last vote. I believe, was there one library that did not agree with the decision to remove or not to filter? That was Yonkers?
Correct.
And how did Yonkers handle that? I'm just sort of curious.
So Yonkers actually implemented their own filter, but on their separate network, because they have a line directly through the city as well. So they run two parallel systems. So they filtered half, and they got E-rate for those, and then not the other half.
Got it.
And so you need, there might be other questions, but just to, the timeline again is, when do you need our sort of,
Ideally, March would be very helpful.
Okay.
Next board meeting, which would be March 30th.
okay, so, all right, so that gives us a little bit of time. I'm sorry,
He had it.
I
questions?
just had a quick question. So this is related to blocking illegal content. Is there any monitoring that happens that is unrelated to that specific
type of content, but might be related to something else that's not illegal per se, but say unsavory or undesirable or objectionable?
Not at the system level. I mean, we would only be able to view any reports that were generated by the software itself that filters. We, would not be doing any kind of spot checking, of what are people doing out in the system at, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. We would not be doing that.
That was the whole, this was the Bush era, this was that whole privacy
Yeah.
thing that came up. This is where that started.
Yeah. Well, it's disconcerting. We want to be very respectful of this process, which is one of the reasons we'd like to build in, the annual review, just to make sure
No, I think
that
that
things are
makes-
working as
yeah.
we believe they would.
I mean, are there any other questions on the board? I think this is incredibly helpful, so thank you. I mean, I think this really crystallizes sort of what we need to, sort of think through. And so I think, everybody should put their thinking caps on, and then we should aim to sort of have a, final discussion on this at the next meeting.
Yeah, and I would certainly say, as you think about it, and you have questions, have Tom
Thank
send
you.
them to me, and we'll do our best.
Thank you.
So, all right.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yep.
See you. Take care.
So just moving on the agenda, unfinished business, downtown development update. There is no update. There's been no further communication with RXR since we last met. So no further update. The minutes that we'll approve reflect the last update, which I think also is no update. So you can refer to the minutes. With that, I think we'll move to public discussion. And the first person on the list is Linda Lallis.
Oh. Good evening, everyone. It's nice to see you, as always. My name is Lourdes Font. I have a background in personnel. Therefore, I am always very curious about individuals in their coming to institutions for what they want to do, who they are, and because of our new 2 appointees, Ms. Barrett and Mr. Bonet, we haven't heard about you a lot, and we would like very much to hear a little bit about how you learned about the trustees and what you'd like to achieve, who you are in relationship to New Rochelle, so we can get to know you. You'll get to know us with our opinions as the time goes on. So if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of information about yourselves, we'd be
If you wouldn't
most appreciative.
mind, let me take that. So we got the email request from Ms. Sachs, and we are going to put together, we actually consulted the Westchester Library System. We're going to put together sort of a press release that goes through some brief remarks on both candidates' backgrounds. Obviously, you're free to engage with them, separately from the meeting, and also should they choose to run for office in the May election, the League of Women Voters typically holds a candidates forum, and if they choose to participate, they'll, also participate in that. But that's sort of the approach we're going to take.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you.
Monique Evelard?
Good evening, everyone. Hi, I'm Monique Evelard, and I basically have a statement. We have written several letters and emails explaining why we want the library to stay where it is. And we also have written a letter to the New York State Commission of Education. And we just want the new members to become acquainted with those letters and what's in them. And we also want them to know why we believe that you have no responsibility to pursue anything with RXR. And we also want them to know why we don't want them to enter into any contract with RXR. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Yellen?
Good evening. My name is Michael Yellen. It's so nice to see so many friendly faces, including Dr. Gray. I have a short recording. It's a little bit over 3 minutes. I was fortunate enough to grow up with someone who was an architect on this building. And over the holidays, I just was having dinner with him and his family, and I just asked him if he'd be willing to give me his thoughts on the importance of this library from an architect's point of view. So if you will, I'm going to go ahead and play it.
Michael, who is this?
This is Jonathan. He introduces himself. He's really professional, unlike some folks I know. So, and if there's questions afterwards, I'm happy to answer them, to the best of my ability.
All right, please identify yourself.
My name is Jonathan Oxhorn.
And what are you professionally?
I'm an architect, and I teach architecture at Cornell University.
Are you tenured?
I am tenured. And back in the day, I was an architect working for Lee Harris Pomeroy. And Pomeroy and Jack Lebduska were the architects for the renovation of the old building that then became the New Rochelle Public Library back in the mid-1970s, right after the first energy crisis.
And what's the architectural value of the library?
Well, it was an early example of an adaptive reuse of a structure rather than tearing it down at great expense and building a new building. They tried to reuse the existing structure as much as possible and then reclad it in a kind of a white tile and then add some new elements, being very conscious of the sustainable aspects, which at the time weren't called sustainable aspects, but they were dealing with energy savings and daylighting, very similar issues that are current today. This was back in the mid-'70s after the first energy crisis.
And could you describe more fully some of those aspects?
Well, the first, as I already mentioned, was the reuse of the existing building, rather than tearing it down and putting it into making it land waste and building new. So they sustained the existing structure. Then they had an internal skylight that brought daylighting into a lot of the structure. So that would also be an energy-saving feature by having as much daylighting as possible into the new building. And there were other things that I can't recall. I just remember a diagram that was published in Progressive Architecture, which was an architectural trade magazine at the time, which listed all of the sustainable features of the building. And so we'll dig up that picture and then you can get a better idea of what those features were.
Thank you. Is there anything you would like to add for the New Rochelle public about the value of the library?
Sure. Well, at the time, there were great ambitions for the building. It was thought to be a kind of a starter for urban redevelopment of that area by inserting this new building, this public building. Specifically, as a public building, it would have a regenerative impact on the whole neighborhood. So it was kind of a seed that was meant to grow and trigger redevelopment around this public core.
Is there any value to maintaining it the way it is as an architect?
Well, it has a certain charm in that it represents one of the early interventions in the mid-'70s that were dealing with issues that are now current. With the current interest in sustainability, this was a precursor of that interest. And it was also an early example of how urban design can transform a neighborhood.
And other than you talking about the importance of it in this situation, how do you think it would be looked at in the future?
Hard for me to say. I'm not a nostalgic guy. It was an interesting project for its time, and I'll leave it to others to decide what its value is for the future.
Thank you very much, Professor Oxhorn.
Thank you very much. I'd be happy to email it, I guess, to Mr. Giaffino.
Thank you. That was really interesting. We've been in touch with Lee Harris Pomeroy, and actually, I'd like to have it. I think we'd like to share it with our archives.
Okay, thank you.
And Michael, as you know, I'm a land use attorney, and I deal with architects all the time, and I've grown ever more fascinated with the history of this building, with this architecture. A member of the Kroc Committee, an architect, Richard Bienenfeld, local architect, was telling us about the Pomeroy, the awards he's won, and I asked him, this was at the last Kroc meeting, is there any way we can get the plans for this building? Because it's been an impediment. Every time we tried to do something, we don't have a full set of plans. So I want to talk to you afterwards about follow-up. Oh.
Greg, I have an answer for you.
Oh, thank you.
Peter Nance, who is another local architect on CROC, which is the Capital.
Repairs Oversight Committee, and I
Thank you. It
saw
sounds
Peter
better.
today.
Peter's reached out to Mr. Harris, and he is starting to look through the archives to see if he can obtain the documentation about the building, because, to make a long story short, for some reason, the library does not have this
Never did.
documentation, nor does City Hall, which is a real shocker. So it would be a real gain for us in terms of understanding the building and the historical antecedents to have that information.
Well, thank you. And I still want to follow up with you, Mike.
There's another very short, like 30-second clip that I'm not going to bore you with, but in it, Professor Oxhorn does mention that another important and valuable aspect of the architecture of the building is that there was a female was a lead in the architecture group at a time in the mid-'70s when really that was not a very common thing. So thank you very much.
One other interesting issue was this building was set up to accept solar energy, and for some reason, it never got off the ground. But the architects that put this building together were very thoughtful and looking towards the future, and knew some of the trends that we'd have to be dealing with.
Thank you. Maxine Galou? Thank you. Seth Marcusfeld? Dan Miller?
Good evening. Hi, I'm Dan Miller. I'm a New Rochelle resident for the past 27 years, 28 years. I haven't met you two, so. I'm also a physician in South Yonkers for the last 30 years. So I was thinking the other day, I got a call in my office a few weeks ago that somehow got passed through to me, and I pick up the phone, and it's a man who introduces himself to me as a financial planner, and starts telling me that he would like to manage my assets for the well-being of me and my family, and, you know, will I sign up? And have any of you ever gotten these calls?
No.
Never. No. Greg, how did those assets work out for you? And he goes on to tell me that that he'll do this for no charge. And for those of us who get these calls, and Greg, are you the only one who's gotten these? Chuck, you never get these? Like, you know, you do this for
in the industry.
Right, I know. So,
so be careful.
So, you know, so it's always right, I'll get the call. Introduce yourself to me if you call me. Right. So, you know, so it struck me of, you know, so why are these things funny? And they're funny because clearly we know, and I know when I get this call, and we all know that that my best interest, my family's best interest is not what he's interested in. And we've all come to grow up realizing that you don't, in fact, get something for nothing. So it brings me back, you know, I appreciate you guys have shared with us, we've talked a lot about fiduciary responsibility, and you shared with us the definition here, and I think it's a great definition. And, you know, and it brings me back to the central question that we've all been talking about for probably more than a year now, about fiduciary responsibility in yours and RXR. And, you know, and the parallel, you know, I think is, you know, I'm trying to make this clear, that I think for most of us here, we're really clear that RXR's interest is not the interest of the library. The RXR's interest is to create something that they will profit from and most likely then leave. And, you know, as I read this, and I think you've said this to us before, Chuck, that the board's fiduciary responsibility is solely to the library, and I guess the patrons of the library, but not to the city, not to the county, solely to the library. And it seems apparent to me, at least, and I think we've talked about this, that the offer from them of sign a contract with us for nothing, we'll give you this, that we don't get something for nothing, that there's a clear interest here of where this leads, and it leads, in their mind, down the path to raising the library and moving it into, as we've talked about, a residential building. I think we've heard that, in fact, I think I'm correct, that there has never been, or maybe almost never been, a successful venture of this kind. And so I make the point to you again, and to you guys who I haven't made the point to before, that it seems to me that your fiduciary responsibility to the library is to not engage in any way with people who do not have the best interest of the library at heart. So, thank you.
Thank you. Marjorie Sachs?
Good evening, everybody. It's interesting to me that Terry Kirshner was here because I wanted to say that.
He's still here.
Oh, hi. That Mr. Giaffino was very kind to have Dorothy Oliver and myself go to the annual meeting of the Westchester Library System, which was really, really interesting, and I actually took notes. And I wanted to just share some of them with you because Regent Judith Johnson was there, and what she said was that, among many things, that the libraries are community centers for civic engagement. She said they reflect the Greek democracy of years ago. And the part that really got me, though, was that she said that the exterior buildings of our libraries should not be touched, that sometimes the insides can need some transformation, and you've been doing that beautifully here. You've been doing lots of things, getting grant monies to do that. And she said that it's important to honor the exterior of our libraries and their historic importance. And I think after hearing the interview that Michael had, I think we have really a better sense of the historic importance of this. So with all due respect to the new appointees, I'm going to again just reiterate that I think it's really important that no major decision get made until you have a full elected board that is, and with the people who are elected, have enough time to be educated about the issues, because this is of such utmost importance. Thank you.
Thank you. So moving on through the agenda, we're going to move to the approval of the minutes. Tom, you were kind enough to circulate these in advance. We'll give a minute for those that may not have had a chance to look at them. I'm going to motion to approve the minutes.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Minutes approved. So moving on to the financial reports. I don't think we have anything to report per se. I mean, I don't want to go out of order. We'll touch a little bit on the financial position when we get to the budget committee meeting, because we obviously reviewed where we are from a financial perspective as part of that. Tom, any statistics report anything you want to mention?
Nothing in particular.
Okay. Dr. Gray, WLS report?
I've spent my entire career in what were public arenas of public jobs. I've spent my entire career in, well, now I'm at a private university, but I've spent my entire career in public organizations. And I'm always fascinated by the public competing needs. I've tried to keep you informed about the Central Library issue. I think that we had a meeting. I mean, I gave you that report where it was very clear that, and we decided not to even go anywhere near the exterior of Mount Vernon Public Library, nor the interior. However, because the public has always a right to have opinions and attitudes and whatever you want to call it, we now have a situation with WLS where the Central Library has engaged the, I guess, the advocacy of its own assemblyman. It's appropriate. that assemblyman has received information that is inaccurate about the motivation of the Central Library. And it comes down to trust and race. It just does. And I think I said that. I said it to the Mount Vernon Public Library when we had the meeting and we gave the report. And so WLS has still some trust building to do. The public library directors of this county has some, because this began with public library directors. So we have some building to do. WLS has the absolute right to decide on the budget with the PLD input of the Central Library, but it is still an ongoing issue, and I will keep you informed. It's not, it's not something that's horrible. It's just that the Central Library issue constantly comes up, and maybe we've done a poor job of getting people to understand the Central Library in Mount Vernon is symbolic to them, and I've always understood that, and I've always been against doing anything, personally. But we need to build trust there, and the public library directors also do.
Thank you, Dr. Gray. I just want to mention that, once again, Library Advocacy Day is upon us on February 28th. I would encourage board members who may have some time in their schedules to consider journeying to Albany to lobby our legislators in regards to next year's budget. Unfortunately, Governor Cuomo has called for a cut, both in terms of library aid as well as library construction monies. Last year, the legislature overruled the governor and gave us a budget that was terrific, was useful. In particular, library construction monies make a big difference throughout the county. Here in New Rochelle, we've seen, we'll probably see with the upcoming grant, well over $1 million that allowed us to restore the physical plant. So I would encourage the board members and anybody in the audience or anybody who's watching to lobby your legislators, ask them to support appropriate funding for libraries, both in terms of annual aid and construction monies. That's it.
Thank you, Tom. Go to the director's report.
Sure. My report is not very long. Once again, we have a grant I mentioned earlier for our theater HVAC project. We're in the process of hopefully moving forward, using that money to restore and make the heating and the air conditioning work. Tonight it feels rather hot, so once again, I hope we're able to go forward with this project. The Buildings and Grounds Committee will have a recommendation to share with the board a little later tonight. We're still waiting on final approval for our circulation lobby grant. Our foundation has called it the Gateway Project, which I think is a brilliant use of a term. And so that's nearly $275,000. That will make a tremendous difference as people enter the library and will allow us to be more efficient, ADA compliant, and secure. So that's something we're anxious to see arrive and then move forward. And just wonderful, normal things like our friends continue to manage the donations that the community gives us, over 1,000 books a week, believe it or not. And they do an amazing job, all volunteer staff. And once again, their book sale for March is coming up, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. And of course, their Friends Bookstore is open on Tuesdays and Thursdays and Saturdays. I would encourage everybody to consider patronizing them. Great books at a great cost, great building a business plan that allows people to purchase books, start their own libraries at a very minimal cost. Their next meeting is March 7th. Speaking of great advocacy groups, our foundation continues to provide financial resources as well as advocacy. Their next meeting is March 19th, then May 21st, and then their annual meeting and dinner is June 19th. We are waiting on a decision in regards to their grant for us for fiscal year 18-19. It may well be the matching money that we need in order to obtain the grant for the Gateway project, and so that's coming up, but we're still looking for grant money otherwise. The foundation has a terrific board member who has a history in terms of grant writing and development, and she's working on something right now. So that's exciting. I want to remind the board that if at all possible, even though it's Valentine's Day, the library is sponsoring a volunteer recognition tea on Wednesday, February 14th at 4 p.m. Our library wouldn't be the library that it is without our volunteers. They certainly are the friends, the foundation, the board, you are volunteers. And the people that make the library work in a variety of areas. And thanks to Barbara Davis and the community relations staff, they will have a lovely tea and savories. And so hope we get good attendance there. Reminding everybody that, of course, the Mayor's State of the City event is coming up on March 1st, and that will be held in the City Hall Council Chambers. And last but not least, our election is approaching May 15th, and that will be an election that will vote on our budget, whatever that budget might be, as well as 3 vacancies for our board. And
It's
that's it.
3?
3.
Tom, I just saw it on the agenda, but maybe if during your report you could just comment on what a wonderful day last Saturday was in terms of Norman Rockwell, in terms of this institution, and in terms of that man.
Right. Thank you, Greg. You folks know that the library has been the proud custodian of Norman Rockwell's painting, The Land of Enchantment, since the 30s. And it was displayed proudly in our Pintard Avenue facility and has been here since our opening in the 70s. 3 years ago, we decided to move the painting out of the building because, first of all, it needed some major conservation work, and also because we're in the process of sprinkling the building and doing a door and window project, so we thought that was an opportune time to have it restored. It was restored. And as Greg mentioned, this past Saturday, we had a birthday party for Norman Rockwell. And tied to that birthday party was an unveiling of the painting. And Chuck had made some very thoughtful remarks. And then Barbara Davis was kind enough to share a history regarding Rockwell's painting. And then after that, we were lucky enough to have a program in this theater featuring a woman who was actually a model for Norman Rockwell in Vermont. And she happens to be the mother of one of our residents, Stephanie Tomei, which was ironic. Stephanie moved here, and Barbara didn't realize that her mother was indeed a model, not here in New Rochelle, but in Vermont. So it was a wonderful day. Our painting is back. It looks different, much brighter. The yellows and the greens are popping. And having said all of that, we also have a very nice security system in place to protect it, which is truly important. And I just want to congratulate everybody that attended and supported us. And once again, this painting, which was given to the people of New Rochelle, is back in New Rochelle and available for all to see.
And then big thank you right to the Friends as well. Didn't they pay for the restoration?
The Friends paid for the conservation as well as the transportation, the boxing, not an inexpensive proposition, but as always, our friends step up like our foundation. We asked them for the money to make this happen. They produced it, and as a result, we have a renewed Norman Rockwell painting back in our facility.
And
Just, sorry, go ahead.
no.
Yes. Okay, so I just want to, I brought the kids, and I can't really get my son away from the treating table most days, but my daughter, who's a little bit more, she was able to read the Diary of the Day of the Girl, and the art project was she got to draw a day in the life of Julissa. So it really, and then the model, I think, was the girl from the book, The Day and the Girl. So it was a really, just a really cool way to introduce this iconic author and sort of make it real for her, So I think she kind of came in and was like, why are we here? And like, why are they lifting the tablecloth? And she really didn't understand why her mom dragged her. And I was like, you'll appreciate this when you're older kind of moment. But she left really proud of her work and happy to read the book and happy to see the woman who the book was based on. So just kudos. And the volunteers were from Ursuline. I think they were delightful young ladies. So just a really great time.
And to have her sign a book from the granddad to his grand girl. It was just a fabulous day, people, and it makes you so proud of this institution, this building, and Norman Rockwell. The more I get to know this guy, and to segue from what you said about trust, such an unassuming man who gave away his oils, his charcoals, but was waiting for that check from the Saturday Evening Post in order to feed his kids. In this day and age where we've just lost trust for everything and celebrity seems to be all important, where all of our institutions, our local school, we're scared. What does it mean? What are we going through? To learn about this man, to learn about that times. Yes, they were conformist, they were optimist, but this institution that I hope you can all still trust in.
Thank you. Did you have more in your report?
I did not.
Okay. Thank you. Just moving on to the personnel report.
Just one item for your consideration. Happy to report that after a long period of time, we were able to find a well-qualified candidate to fill our hourly librarian one slot. That person's particular activities is archivist, and we just talked about New Rochelle and its history, and we have a tremendous collection of photographs and manuscripts and all sorts of documents, and we're getting more all the time. And our previous archivist sadly retired due to ill health, and we found this gentleman, and so I'd like to ask you to make a motion to accept our new employee, Tim Tatro. He's the hourly librarian one archivist. He is starting at a wage of $25.26. His start date was January 18th of this year.
I'll move.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to the committee reports. First report's the Budget Committee. I think I'm the chair of the Budget Committee. I'll take that one. So the Budget Committee, Deirdre, Yadira, and myself met with Tom and Jean a week or so ago. Friday evening Budget Committee meeting. Scintillating way to start the weekend. Yeah, it was last Friday. And just to remind folks or those that might be new to the process, so we have to submit our budget to the school district for their April meeting?
Probably we should decide.
We have to decide on March, but we've got to submit it to the school district, and then, for everything to get on the ballot in time in May, and for us to get the messages out there. So we sat down with Tom and Jean, and we sort of went through, where we are. We're basically halfway through the fiscal year, where we are sort of year-to-date relative to our budget from last year, which I referenced I would kind of touch on that. Everything's looking sort of in line what we would expect. Some of the expenses are very seasonal, so they happen either at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, but everything based on our previous experience looks like we're sort of, in line with, our budgeting for actual spend, so that's obviously a very good thing. In terms of the budget for next year, what the committee intends to present at next month's meeting for a vote. We're going to do a similar approach to what we did last year, which is provide sort of probably three different scenarios. Sort of, a scenario that's sort of with all the things that Tom and the staff would ideally like to include in this year's budget within reason. The next sort of gradation will be a budget, and that budget will probably be based on what we reviewed a little bit above the tax cap for the year. That's been put forth, which is around 1.84%. So we'll have the sort of ideal budget. Then we'll have sort of a budget that is sort of in line with the tax cap, with a 1.84% increase, and then we'll have sort of a budget that is flat to last year. And so and the committee, as it has in previous years, will make a recommendation of which budget we think should be put forth for a vote, and obviously ask questions. I would say I don't know that there's, just to give people a preview, some of the expenses are going up because they're mandated increases in, our biggest expense is our people, as many organizations. And because of our, we agreed to a new union contract, and so those increases are not sort of negotiable because we've already negotiated them and agreed to them. So, that's a big piece of it. And then, healthcare expenses, which we don't set. Anybody that works at a place where they get their health insurance probably is very aware, or they pay for it on their own. Everybody knows that healthcare premiums continue to unfortunately rise. We're not immune to that, so that's another piece. And then there are in the sort of the highest version of the budget, there are some service additions to the library, and we obviously try to be thoughtful and responsive around the needs of the community and our patrons, and I think Tom and the staff do a really nice job of having their fingers on the pulse of that. So I'd say it won't be I don't think this will be a controversial discussion. I think everything's relatively straightforward, and so we're going to sit down again the 16th, right?
Next Friday at
Yeah,
9
next
a.m.
Friday at 9 a.m.
You guys have no life.
Instead of next Friday at 6:30 p.m., which we did last time. We will aim to circulate to the group, certainly sort of post that meeting, kind of where we are, and give people an opportunity to.
So we will have data before
Correct.
the meeting.
Yep. And certainly can circulate questions. That's, anything you want to add?
I think what we're waiting for, why we're meeting again, is just we had some questions, and Tom and
Yep.
Jean were going to provide some data and some info as to some of the requests, so that we could sort of understand why proposals. I just wanted to fill in why we're having a second meeting.
100%.
Before the March.
Yep.
But that's it.
So that is the Budget Committee update. Building and Grounds.
Building and Grounds, we had a great meeting of the Capital Repairs Oversight Committee. That, I didn't say it. It was my name. Come on.
You remember it, don't you?
I will no longer come up with acronyms for this. I will no longer come up with acronyms for this board. But there was a lot accomplished in terms that we moved the HVAC project forward. We're waiting to get in the bids and the final contract to allow that to proceed in this, I'd say, in the next 12 months. And in fact, it has to begin earlier than that because of the award, the grant, et cetera. So
I thought the committee recommended to accept the bid that Jean Eng, our consultant.
well, it's a proposal, isn't it?
No, it was the.
We had the proposal to the board.
Right, you have to
Right.
present it to the board, I thought, for a vote this evening.
Okay, if you want to go through it on the bid that was proposed.
Sure. We engaged the services of a consultant to help us assess out the project. We had a bid process. The consultant actually initially came back with a number of bids that were far higher than we originally expected. So the committee, both committees, and our consultant, Jean Eng, and Harry Spring, sort of sharpened the pencils, went back and reconfigured the project, not in terms of the final outcome, which is to repair and replace the theater HVAC system so that we are actually in control of it, so that we don't broil. We don't broil here now in the winter season or freeze again in the summer season. And through that process, Mr. Eng was able to come up with one vendor who could provide the HVAC work, and also used separate vendors to provide the electrical work as well as the general construction work that was necessary. And the budget that he presented us actually on November 20th of last year was for a project that was going to cost $540,000. And this by far was the least expensive bid out there. The committee had a chance to meet, and we have 3 library board members on it, as well as 3 members of the community who have particular expertise. We have 2 architects and a building manager, and we vetted the project, we asked questions, and it was by a formal vote that the CROC and the Buildings and Grounds Committee recommended that the library board consider accepting this bid, and upon a vote, if it is a positive one, we'll reach out to Mr. Ang, he'll reach out to the vendor, and then we'll start the process of planning to do this work. Our goal is to, if it's possible, it's a tight time frame, is to do this work when we least impact the activities of the theater, because our theater is an incredible asset, a draw to our community. We have proposed a period of time in June before our big summer programming push. The vendor is considering that option. If in fact that doesn't work, what we might end up doing is starting the project upon the cessation of summer programming later in August. But we would love to do it before the summer begins so that our audience members and performers would be comfortable as we go through the summer.
How long is the work expected to take?
I believe the work is expected to take, in terms of the theater will be out of commission for 3 weeks. The total time period for the project, the estimate was approximately 6 weeks to 2 months.
And we, just for the 2 new board members, this has been out there for a while. And so this isn't, I mean, it's been reviewed several times. Yeah, I think we've seen it before. The one question I had, and I just want to refresh my memory, I think we did this, we reference checked the vendor that he selected, right? And they got like really good
Excellent
reviews.
reviews.
Okay.
And we're planning, if we move forward with this project, to use a different model in which we expect to meet with the consultant and possibly the vendor on a weekly basis, bringing our members of the committee so that there can be real dialogue, a real sense of what's going on.
And a real sense of urgency?
And a sense of urgency.
So we don't.
No less important.
So we don't repeat the doors?
The door incident? Yeah. Agreed.
So should,
That should be voted on,
Should we
that
put it to a vote?
proposal, yes. So the proposal that has been distributed, has everyone had a chance?
Yep. Should I make a motion? Do you want to make a motion?
Oh, I'll make the motion. That the proposal from the bid from GC Ang in the sum of $540,000. This is dated July 9th and revised November 20th, 2017, that this bid be accepted by the board. I so move.
I second the motion. All in favor? Aye.
Tom, did you want to just cover briefly the other items that were reviewed at that grounds and building and grounds and CROC meeting, just to
Sure, Greg.
tie it in?
It was an active meeting. It was great to get everybody together to talk about the other issues that we're looking at. One was a project near and dear to everybody's heart, and that is finding a way to improve the exterior of the building without changing its basic view. As you know, certain portions of the building are stained and dirty. When the decision was made years ago to clad the building in the white tile, there was no sense that the building would become as stained as it has, and that's due to the environment and also some leakage from some of the moldings that were installed in the building. The committee is looking at options in terms of cleaning, painting, so to speak, this building. A CROC member, Peter Nance, the architect that I referenced earlier, who was reaching out to the architect, Mr. Pomeroy, to have a real sense of what the building is like in terms of the documents. He is exploring some options that he will share with the committees in the near future. So that's one thing that's I'm very excited about. I think if we can find a way to clean the exterior of the building without harming its historic origin, I think that would be a real asset for us. And so we're moving forward on that. And let's see what else.
And we reviewed the circulation desk that you've already presented tonight. And the energy expert that we had in, that was absolutely fascinating. And I, in the parking lot at City Hall today, as I was trying to pay my parking space, you know what fun that is, who is behind me but Peter Nance. And, I said to him, I've got to get the name and contact info for that guy because I keep getting people that want to join me on a tour of his house in New Rochelle that is like the, geothermal, solar. I think he actually makes money every month in terms of the grid. It was a great meeting.
It was a great meeting. Peter brought that gentleman along who is a New Rochelle resident who has a business that provides geothermal and solar, and also has a home that's apparently a showcase for that feature. And I think the Buildings and Grounds and CROC Committee want to continue the dialogue and learn more about these options.
And it was particularly timely as we were looking to invest in the existing HVAC for this space. Wait a minute, are we doing something wrong? Should we be looking at the oil-based system? And we need this now. But the fact is that these, just as the building was designed to be sustainable, at least from a 70s standpoint, it's something we're always looking at.
That's great.
Thanks, Greg.
Do we have any Community Relations Foundation?
Oh, Daniel.
So for community relations, the Community Relations Committee has not met, but I had a fantastic lunch with Hannah and Tom to kind of get an insight on the community relations aspect, brainstorming ideas. One thing that did come up was in regards to the library board and our, I guess, presence in the community. One thing that I think the board should consider would be for us to design some kind of pin or name tag of some sort that when we are out there in, for example, the mayor's city address, that we're identified representing the board. Many of us have different capacities and are involved in a lot of organizations, jobs, and so forth. So when we're there at those events that we're there representing, for example, Tom has a pin right now, so it can be something like that that has the New Rochelle logo, with our name, Trustees, something that really kind of stands out, that we know that at that time we wear a pin and we're there representing the library. So that's somewhere to start to get the word out there. And moving forward, really getting involved with the foundations that support our library efforts, and just helping out as much as we can, and getting out there, as well as meeting. I plan to have meetings with Barbara Davis and her community relations team. I will try on a monthly basis, but I will work on a schedule with Barbara so we can kind of get updated on things that are happening, and perhaps getting the word out there, or anything that the board can do to support any of the events that the community relations department is doing.
Daniel, the idea that Daniel and Hannah, and it was both of them together, came up with this idea today for a pin. I think it's a wonderful idea, and there are plenty of vendors that do this sort of thing, and at a pretty modest cost. I've done it with other organizations. So what I'll do is start on a little research, maybe come up with some options for the board to consider. And our general thought was the logo of the library, the fact that your board members, perhaps your names as well, and we'll just sort of go from there.
I'd like mine to be larger than everybody else's.
Well, Chuck, that was a given.
When is your term up?
Because Chuck is the president and the most modest member of the board. And Daniel, I did reach out to Barbara about a meeting, and she responded immediately and said that she would be reaching out to you to set up all of this. And it was a good meeting, and I'm excited about Daniel's chair.
Thank you.
Good things.
Yes, thank you.
Just to throw out another spin too, I've done some outreach to different areas in the community that I think I've been encouraging a lot of people in our community to come attend these meetings. I think they're very, very, very important. Working with different leaders in the community, different religious groups that attend here, moms, senior citizens, just that use the library but do not know when these events happening. I'm so happy that the library, we're finally streaming this in one way, shape, or form on YouTube or wherever we're putting it on our website. So we're doing what we can to really make sure that we get the community involved. And I think as a community relations and our board, I think it's very important as us community citizens and volunteers that the community is here represented. So
Fantastic.
Great.
Finance, Treasury, and Audit.
Do you want to run that in terms of that, where we finally are? Aren't we finally somewhere?
I think. It's like, this is like a bad rerun. So there's probably something in here, yeah.
There is.
So I guess there's a couple of things. Maybe I'll take the one that's still a little bit open, but almost hopefully done, which is the agreement with the school district that just outlines sort of, our obligations, their obligations with respect to financings, short-term, long-term financings. We had a little bit of we had thought we were done, and then, we weren't. Their attorney who has since retired. And been replaced by an attorney who says we're almost there, and there's sort of, we were hoping we might actually have had kind of the final document tonight. We don't, but I don't think there's any business issues left from our perspective or from the school district's perspective. The last thing that we had concern about, they ceded, and so we're sort of.
It's just those darn lawyers.
I got to be careful with my other board members. So we should hopefully be able to kind of circulate that in advance of the next meeting and just sort of ratify it. I think I signed the last one, and then the school board refused to sign it.
They
So
did.
we'll go through it again at the next meeting, and then hopefully sign it for real this time. In the same vein of financing, the other thing that we need to make a decision on, not tonight, but in relatively near future, is we currently have a bond outstanding for capital projects that happened years ago. The borrowings that we have outstanding for more recent capital projects are currently in the form of a bond anticipation note, which is a shorter term type of financing that one puts in place when one is still doing the projects that the debt authorization was for. And then the sort of best practice is once you complete all the projects, you then convert that bond anticipation note into a bond which has a longer term maturity appropriate with the types of whatever the authorization was that we got when we got the permission to borrow. So we're now at a place, and correct me if I missed anything, where we now have clarity of what the costs that we actually incurred were relative to the authorization, and so it's prudent practice now to convert that bond anticipation note into a bond. And so we, as part of the budgeting process, and this finance committee kind of ties back to the budget, we need to make sure we budget appropriate issuance costs and ongoing debt service costs for a bond to replace this short-term financing. So we got some information today. I don't know that I think we don't need to go through it tonight, but the finance committee will meet and seek to deliver a recommendation, to the board in terms of the financing. I'd say, not to sort of prejudge things, but I think we will be probably recommending that we go ahead with the bond now that we're at the point where we are, because rates are probably only going to go up as anybody that reads the paper or listens to the radio or television. And it's also best practice to sort of, you're not supposed to keep floating, short-term maturities forever.
Will we have those finance figures for the budget before the budget?
Yes,
And
yes.
you're in both subjects.
Yes, and we already have some of them now. They didn't have the cost in here for the attorney's fees, which kind of shocked me because I know this guy's not an attorney, but he obviously knows what it costs to, roughly. But yeah, we
Funny,
should
I
have.
missed that number.
We should have that,
So are you recommending that the finance committee meet before the next meeting to have a recommendation?
Yes,
Okay.
yeah, I think we should.
And James Knightco, who is our advisor, indicated that he would be available via phone for a meeting.
I think we also maybe should chat with, and Jean, we may we can talk, separately about this, but in the vein of continuing to build more bridges with the school district, maybe we should have a chat with the treasurer for the school district and sort of be like, look, because they may have.
That we talked about it at a budget meeting.
Yeah.
Just to give her a heads up, because we do have a payment in July.
Yeah.
And she marked it on her calendar. We're going to talk about it.
Do you think she'd be willing to sort of sit with us?
She wants to come to a meeting.
Okay, good.
Oh, well, maybe that's the one to, maybe that's the one to focus on.
Yeah.
And she will come to meet you.
Okay. Let's do that then.
Yes, let's try to tie her into this process.
Yeah, okay. No, that's fine. I think that'll be good, because, look, she may have some ideas and thoughts that we, they do this a lot more than we do. So, that's a key takeaway for the Finance, Treasury, and Audit Committee. But I don't think we have anything else. No, that's it. Personnel Committee.
I'll speak for Deirdre. We need to schedule a meeting, and so I think we were.
Doodle. You've got a doodle.
I owe a doodle?
You owe a
So there you
doodle.
go. I need to respond to the doodle so that we can schedule a meeting that I think overlapped with the other two committee meetings we had the last week. So hopefully we'll meet before March. We will
No, I-
affirmatively meet before March.
Right, we have the two committee members, myself. Once you vote, it's possible we could meet next week or the week after. There's a variety of issues.
Daniel, me, and Deirdre. Is that one?
Yeah, Danielle has responded, Deirdre responded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have the project manager on your list? Is that?
She does.
Okay, so that's on your list.
Good.
Oh, and then policy, okay. So we, what night do we, January? It's the Friday before the Friday of the budget meeting. And so Tom brought up just 6 different policies, I guess, just to frame it, of different issues that were sort of needed either amending or just establishing term policies. Tom, have you
Sure.
summarized?
I'm happy to do so.
No, it's okay.
Sure. The first policy was a policy for library tutors. As you know, we have many tutors that use our library. We welcome their usage of the library. Many of them are people who have been employed by the school district, and they're looking for sort of that third place to meet. And it's been a good arrangement, but we just wanted to set some ground rules in regards to how the building is used with our tutors. And this was a policy that was, again, written by our staff, who know best, looked good to myself, our committee as well.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I think they set the parameters well. I think it was thoughtfully written and everything.
It was really thoughtfully written. They know best.
So I guess we would vote and make a motion to vote the policy for library tutors.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Next policy is, once again, a new policy, and that relates to something great that's happening in our teen area, and that is the introduction of a laptop kiosk unit, in which, thanks to our foundation, they gave us upwards of $20,000. And so we have a unit now, or soon to be, in the teen area that will house 6 laptops, and it will allow our teens to take a laptop and sit in various areas in the teen space to use it. It's exciting. We have some computers in the teen area, but not nearly enough. And so this is a great opportunity to assist our teens in using computers in a non-traditional way. And it's a system that has been tried and true. There were some concerns about being able to, protect the computers, but we had many conversations with many libraries throughout the country in communities similar to ours, and they've had great success. And so to that end, like with the tutor policy, we just wanted to establish rules, guidelines, so that everybody is familiar with their responsibilities. And again, this was written by our staff, our teen librarian, and our IT head. And it looked good to me, and we shared with the committee.
Nothing to add.
Do we need the last line, laptops?
Yes.
Well, that's in 2 places, actually, with a colon. I was wondering why.
No.
And there's a bullet point with no
No,
bullet.
Yeah, we can take care of that.
Anything we want.
Maybe not. As amended, then?
I make the motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
The next policy is our museum pass policy, and that has been in place for many years. As you folks know, we have 23 museum passes that are available to our residents at no cost. These passes are funded by our foundation and are available to our residents so they can take the opportunity themselves or their families to go to see the Intrepid, or to go to the Guggenheim, or MoMA, or the Frick, or the Children's Museum in Manhattan, or the Children's Museum in Norwalk, Connecticut. They're just great programs. We're seeing tremendous usage. And one of the policy strictures that was created when we first began this program, was that we limited the number of loans that our patrons could have on a monthly basis. And there were 2 a month because we had so few. We were afraid that some smart people would monopolize this program. Now that we've more than tripled our passes, we wanted to open it up more, make it more available to our patrons. So the only change in the museum pass policy is to move it from twice a month to 4 times a month.
No comment on the policy, but in case anyone's watching, it might just be my mom. Last year, but for the record, last year, year-to-date, 435 passes were used. Right now, year-to-date, we're at 431. So we are in, what, February?
Yeah.
We're at 431. And some of these museums are really expensive, really, really expensive. And this is clearly giving a lot of people in my community a chance to just engage with the awesomeness it is to live in the tri-state area. So, like, no further, let's make a motion,
No.
move that puppy.
Tom, has the museum selection, has that changed in any way since we started the program?
Oh, it's grown tremendously. We've more than tripled the number of museums. And
Do we have them met yet, or they don't?
We do have them met.
Oh, because I got in when we didn't have them.
Wait, no, we do.
I thought we did, though, because we talked about it.
Right.
There's a whole list in the package.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see the list. Oh, I didn't see that. Where's that? It's in there somewhere.
There's the stats, and then there's a list of museums and how many are used every month by, like, in each museum.
I have a question, and I think there may not be an answer, but do we know demographically who uses the passes?
No, we've never, it's always been a matter of privacy, so we've never tracked, your zip code or your ethnicity, et cetera. But it seems to be a fairly broad cross-section of the community, and our goal in making these passes available is to try to touch on all interests and segments in the community. It might be child-related, it might be adult, it might be art, it might be nature. We have El Museo del Barrio. We have a museum in Harlem. I mean, so we're really trying to be as diverse as possible. Next year, we're looking at the addition of I think it's the Jewish Museum in the city. I've been pushing for, there's a little sort of a train museum in Danbury, Connecticut, which most kids.
I've been.
Is it, would you recommend it?
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
I like trains.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Trains are good.
People of all ages like trains. So that's one of the, I'm glad you said that. It's gotten good reviews. Another one is the Boscobel House in Garrison. Again, it's something a little bit different. It's a lovely old house in Garrison, New York. So we're really trying to, Daniel, be as wide open and diverse as possible. And what I would say to the board is if you have an experience at a museum in the locality, the tri-state area, share it with us. The foundation, frankly, is funding about $9,000 a year, and it's money well spent.
Yeah.
And they are very much sort of tied to keeping it going and enhancing it, which is something we're happy to do. And I'd be negligent if I didn't highlight one of our staff members, Susan Mackey, who is our children's librarian, who's sort of was the person, the engine that has helped grow this, and she's done a really good job. Yeah, I've gone to that one. Oh, it must be a typo.
There's another one for Stone Barns, says Stone Band.
Oh, another typo.
Stone Bands.
I see you out there, Ms. Manning.
So-
But, yeah, sorry, Greg.
So as modified, do we pass this?
Motion to.
Yeah.
I'll move.
I second. All in favor?
Aye.
Again, another policy I'm going to ask you to consider, and this is through the generosity of our foundation, and actually one foundation board member who brought it to our attention, Dr. Amy Bass, who's publishing a book very soon. It's the Children's Room Chromebook policy, and at the foundation meeting last year, she suggested that we consider purchasing Chromebooks, because that is a computer tool, a device that is being used by our schools, and there are plenty of children who don't always have access to it. We purchased 4, and we actually were the lucky recipient of a donation from a local person who gave us 2 additional Chromebooks. And so they are available, or will be available, once the board approves, and it can help our children do their homework. We have a terrific tutoring program, Steps for Success, for elementary school kids in our children's area, Monday through Friday. Great collaboration with Monroe College, and they will be using the Chromebooks too to help the kids. So
Who signs this? Does the child sign this, or does the, can the
typically,
child sign it?
it's
Are
the
they like-
parent.
Oh, the parent, okay.
Yeah, or the guardian.
The child must be accompanied by an adult age 18, or the second bullet, sort of, I mean, maybe it's not, maybe we could amend it to say.
No, that's fine.
Just, so the teen room, the teenagers do not have Chromebooks?
Not yet.
Right.
We've actually talked about both Chromebooks in other areas, and also this laptop kiosk in other areas too, because it's something that could be really terrific. Chromebooks are pretty inexpensive.
I say that because I know the district, at the high school level and middle school level, they do a lot of their projects, PowerPoints, Chrome slides, so, just curious if students that come here to use a computer and log into their Chromebooks accounts at the school level, if they have access to Chromebooks here.
The
So,
same Google Drive.
the same Google Drive, yeah.
Here's the question. Must be returned 30 minutes before the library closes, and it says the late fee after the time due is $10.
We're pretty flexible about fees. It's just a tool to encourage young people to, or their parents, to return it, that's all.
I think it's a new policy, and we can revisit the fees after a few months of utilization. But in the
Absolutely,
offset, just to
yeah.
kind of give an incentivized retreat.
Right, but all of these policies are not set in stone. Certainly, if there are complaints from the perspective of the staff or the patrons, we'll come back to you.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor?
Yet another aspect of our wonderful foundation and their grants. Last year, we asked for monies to create what we characterized as the Family Computer Center, and that is in the children's area, computers that are available not for children, but for their parents or guardians, because we were finding, unfortunately, parents or guardians had needs to use a computer. Sometimes they would leave their children downstairs, which is not always a good thing given our unattended children policy. So we thought to create an area where parents could very legitimately use the computer while their children were, using the library, would incentivize parents to stay in the area.
So it's like next to the children.
It is. It's in that area. And so, thanks to the foundation, we were able to purchase 2 computers and tables and chairs, and they're placed in the space so that a parent can continue to kind of keep their eyes on their children as they work on the computer. And the time period is, it's fairly short. Was it a half an hour?
Yeah, I think we talked about that a little bit, but we sort of felt that the librarians would be able to monitor usage, and if there wasn't a line, then they would let the parents stay on if they needed to.
Always. And that's our policy for all our other computers. We have a period of time which each patron is allowed to use, and no more than that. But we have enough computers so that we routinely release that rule and allow people to use the computers as long as they need to. But if like the Chromebooks or any other policy, if it's not working, we'll know. We'll come back to you, we'll ask for your advice, support, and amend.
I'll make a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we're almost done.
This has been the most.
This is a very productive
prolific
policy committee.
Policy.
That's what we do it for.
When you're not a budget committee.
I think the point of view was,
Life, but we do
yeah,
policy.
yeah. If we're giving up a Friday night, we're going to get a lot done. Yeah. Yeah, the other policy that we're asking for your consideration and support is a gift and donation policy. And certainly, we, the library, are the very lucky recipient of many gifts and many donations. Sometimes it's monetary, sometimes it's something like a train table, which happens, or trains. I gave up all my kids' trains recently. That was a moment in time. It could be furniture. We get a lot of technology from people. There's this one gentleman in Pelham who has given us lots and lots of technology that we couldn't otherwise afford, including the 2 additional Chromebooks. So we thought that we needed a policy to really sort of provide structure and guidance in terms of people making donations. This policy is in no means to discourage that kind of generosity, those impulses, but we wanted to channel it appropriately.
It was a response to staff, right? We wanted something
Right.
documented.
Right, well, actually, there had been a particular, a particular patron was very intent on donating a rather used rug to the library, and it was a little problematic, so.
Heart's in the right place.
Yes, it was in the right place.
It's hard for staff to make decisions and have policy to rely on.
All of these policies provide the staff with a framework to make decisions so that they're not making decisions based on a whim or a thought or a moment, but based on policy that has been considered by the staff and approved by the board.
Is this policy, and are all these policies on the website?
They are.
Yes.
Yeah, they are. And we have a lot of policies, but you know, the staff is really excited to have some guidance because sometimes it's very difficult to tell a patron something not always so positive. But if there's a policy there that provides the background, it supports them, and actually it allows them to try to make it work, because the whole idea is that while we have policies, our goal is to allow people to walk out of the library feeling positive. You were not bureaucrats, et cetera.
But you also want to manage expectations, and that's what the point of this, in particular, the rug case.
The rug case, yes.
I think this will.
Tom, a question?
No rugs?
Well, if we get some beautiful, expensive Aubusson, we might consider that.
Might prevent some males from entering the library. We don't want to do that. But, Tom, the last line, the last item on this, on the second page, and this isn't necessarily to change this or to suggest a change, but I just wonder how, there seems to me to be maybe a need to look at how our two volunteer members, the foundation and the Friends, and us, how do we handle who's supposed to be doing what in terms of fundraising? And if somebody comes to you and says, I mean, when you say donors are encouraged to consider making their gifts to the foundation or the Friends, there's just a certain maybe need to focus on how do we do this and going in the future. And it's not to change this, but it's to say,
I think it's,
you know, we want to make sure there isn't confusion in the public as to which of our groups are focused on what and what we're focused on as the beneficiary.
Right. Those are all good points, Greg. First of all, to be perfectly honest, the library is not in the business of soliciting gifts and donations per se. Certainly, if someone comes to us, we gratefully accept it. We also remind people that there are other options for their philanthropy. We mentioned the foundation, the Friends. We mentioned the Partnership for the Huguenot Children's Library too. But we gratefully accept any donation that we have. The bigger issue that you raised, and it's something that I think Daniel will be more involved in, is the fact that there is not always clarity in regards to the role of the foundation vis-a-vis the Friends. And I know Chris Sellen, who is our foundation president, and Amy Teets, who is our Friends co-president, are talking about reconvening what we characterize as a summit meeting, which we had probably upwards of 6 years ago. It was at Hannah Just Michael's house, and there was a number of library board members there. Greg, you might have been there.
I
that
was.
evening.
I completely forgot about it.
There were representatives from the Friends Foundation and Partnership boards, just to talk and go over things. And because I think all of our advocacy groups and ourselves, we don't want to step on each other's toes. We don't want to confuse people. We get along, and we have gotten along, but I know they're actually talking about convening this group to just make sure that we're all on the same page, because it is confusing sometimes.
Excellent.
With that, I'll move. that we,
All in favor? Aye.
I think we're done. Yes, yay.
Thanks, everybody. I'd like to make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Oh, could I just, I'm sorry, just one, the special Special Projects Committee. I know you are. We took it away from you.
Come on.
Yeah. The Special Projects Committee.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No worries. Whitney, do you want to talk about it, or shall we, myself and then you, or?
Haven't met.
No, we haven't. But the Rockwell painting was one item, and Greg asked me to talk about it earlier, and it's back, and the surveillance system is there, and we're working out all the components. The one thing I do want to mention is, relative to the Rockwell, is that we had worked with our insurance carrier in terms of making sure we're protecting the Rockwell appropriately. And now that the system is in place, I've reached out to our insurance carrier to send the consultant, sort of the expert, back, because as I've said, I'm anxious. I want to make certain that we are doing everything that we need to do to protect this valuable and this important painting. So I just wanted to say that. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the IMA, the Memorandum of Understanding between the city and the library in regards to the $25,000 PEG grant for the technology to be installed in this theater for broadcast. We were given late last week sort of the contents of the IMA, not the legalese that's attached to it. I looked at that, at the contents, and it all seemed entirely appropriate, and it's really a matter of receiving the money to install the system. We would allow the city to use it, if and when they needed it, not to impair on our operation. And they also promised to support us. If there's equipment that goes down, they would give us a backup equipment to continue to broadcast the meetings that are so important. So I think it's worth looking at these issues. They look good to me, and make sure that we all feel that they're.
We'll share that.
Yeah. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention, and this was another idea that Daniel had actually during the interview, was the idea of our board meetings that are being broadcast. He asked if there could be some way to provide a Spanish version. And actually, there is something that we're working on now, and what it would be is for the YouTube channel, there is the ability to modify the presentation to provide closed captions in Spanish or other languages. And so we think that's a step forward, and it's great. The other component that we're still chewing on, we're kind of newbies here, is once we get our board meetings on the educational channel, and we're sort of still working through that. We're dealing with the powers that be. We will have these meetings on that cable station, but it'll be in English. What my goal is to, and I don't have the expertise, but people here that do, is find a way to provide some sort of Spanish option. You know, I don't have that answer yet, but.
Maybe like the closed captioning.
Right, I'm not sure if that's possible on, it is through YouTube, but I'm not, from what I'm told, it's not, but we're working on it. Among that, John Misowitz, who's been helping us, and our intrepid camera person, Laura, out there, and her husband, Philip. They're giving us advice too as well. And so we're working towards it, but I feel we're making a nice step forward and having this available, the Spanish captions.
Has not the city or the school district looked into this?
Would it be possible on the broadcast that's not, that you don't think it's currently possible to have Spanish captioning? Would it be possible to have a notice, like
Right,
just
a
a
direction.
graphic addition saying, go to this YouTube
Oh, that's a
in
great idea.
Spanish,
Right. Yeah.
for Spanish?
That's smart.
Here's the link
Yeah.
as a
I
stopgap.
think
Yeah,
the
that's
a really
district
good idea.
has, I guess, looked into it, but I think that the TV studio in itself needs a little bit more of enhancement, updated technology, if you will. But I do know in a district level, they do provide, at times, translation services at some of the meetings, where they have a translator speaking through a mic, and if you need it in Spanish, you have your earpiece listening as they're translating the meeting.
Like the UN?
Yeah,
Interesting.
yeah.
Well, we're making progress. I'm happy about that, and we're continuing to move forward.
Wonderful. No, thank you.
Don't hit me with the gavel.
I noticed you put the gavel safely out of reach.
Forever.
Duly noted. Motion to adjourn the meeting?
Second.
All in favor?